available on your batches. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as we now begin the session on digitally enabled lifecycle solutions. The session will explore the role of IoT, predictive analytics, and smart controls in optimizing HVAC systems to reduce energy consumption and emissions. These digital innovations are key to achieve India's net zero 2070 goal in line with the summit's overarching theme of driving sustainability change in an urbanizing world. It's my privilege to welcome our esteemed panelist and moderator to the stage. So please. I now invite Mr. Manjunath, Head Service Modernization and Lifecycle Solutions, Carrier India, to kindly lead the discussion. Thank you.
To start? Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Right. So, we're going to start this panel discussion on digitally enabled lifecycle solutions. It's from a HVAC perspective. So, since it's slightly different from what we have witnessed in the morning, so I have a context-setting presentation. That's probably going to take about 10, 12 minutes, or max 15 minutes. And then we'll invite the panelists. I'll introduce the panelists now. And then we will have the panel discussion discussing about the impact of digital lifecycle solutions. So firstly, thank you, CII, for giving us this opportunity today. I'll introduce myself. I've already been introduced. Name is Manjunath. I head the lifecycle solutions vertical and the modernization vertical for Carrier. I have about 23 years of work experience. I've done IGBC, USGBC lead accreditation. And I've been in the sustainability field for a fairly long time now, for about 2 decades. Let me introduce the panelists. Can we have the screen? Yeah, it's come up. We have Namrata Rana. Namrata Rana comes with 28 years of experience in the areas of sustainability and ESG strategy. She has worked on transformation strategies for India's top 200 companies, as well as created green business models for clients. Namrata also has extensive experience in helping clients on the adoption of net zero principles in their value chain. She has worked on assignments in sectors such as manufacturing, transportation, steel, cement, insurance, fashion, retail, healthcare, mobility, food, hospitality, and green jobs. And also, Namrata has co-authored a couple of books titled Balance, Responsible Business, Shift. I think should welcome her with a round of applause. Namrata, thank you for being here. So the next panelist is going to be Anand Sekhar Sabik. Anand works for Sabik, obviously. Anand Sekhar has been with Sabik's sustainability program since 2009 and currently leads the global lifecycle assessment LCA of Sabik products, including certifications and product declarations. His LCA expertise covers various sectors and has been involved in strategic circular economy and climate programs. Sekhar also contributes to industry standards and guidelines and is a key player in the PCF automation project to automate carbon footprint calculations for Sabik products. He holds an advanced degree in chemical engineering from Mississippi State University. If we can welcome him with a round of applause, people. Thanks. The next panelist is obviously Dheeraj Wadhwa. Dheeraj Wadhwa is Director, Commercial and Overseas Business, works for Carrier Corporation. He joined Carrier in 2005. He has managed increasing responsibilities over the long tenure, which includes leading, growing, and consolidating HVAC businesses for the India region. A mechanical engineer by qualification with a postgraduate diploma in business management, he carries an industry experience of over 20 years. He covers both the India and the overseas portfolio. So with that introduction, I will move into the context setting. This is slightly important because I think it's a slightly different subject. I'm going to talk about the HVAC perspective on digitally enabled lifecycle solutions. I'll try and explain as to why that is more relevant for today's context. I have also got a disclaimer right up front. Okay, I mean, there's some slides which I call them as hygiene slides because you would have seen them, you would have actually known probably more, better than what I'm going to explain it. But from the context of this panel discussion, I think they're relevant slides. So kindly bear with me. I'm going to go through them real quick. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, buildings contribute, about 40% of energy-related GHG emissions are attributed to buildings. And in buildings, if you see really, 50% of the energy consumption is attributed to HVAC. So, but there's good news. Then the good news is, if you're looking at emissions from certified green buildings, up to 30% emissions can be reduced in smart buildings. Now, when I say smart buildings are those buildings which have got there are about 25 different asset categories that gets into a building. And if the assets are smart, if the assets are able to communicate to the IoT platform seamlessly, or if you have a building management system in a building, so then the digitally enabled lifecycle solutions is going to be a possibility. In the last couple of years, the industry that I represent, the HVAC industry, has made sure that any asset that gets out of the factory premise is digitally enabled. It's basically able to seamlessly communicate to the IoT platform, making the digitally enabled lifecycle solutions possible. Now let's look at it. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, there are some hygiene slides, kindly bear with me. So the conversations around climate change, the extreme weather events that we are witnessing currently is actually on account of a 1.1 degree raise in the global average temperatures. So when I say this, from the pre-industrial era. So when did the pre-industrial era start? It started in the 1700s. But do we have written records of what the temperature back then was? No. 1850 onwards, I think we have been trying to capture the global average temperatures. And to say, I think it'll be fair to say that the global average temperature increase of 1.1 that we are witnessing right now is from the 19th century to the 20th century. I mean, that's the temperature difference that we are seeing. And apparently 2023 happened to be the warmest year, recorded at 1.36 degrees centigrade raise in the global average temperature compared to the pre-industrial era. And in the last 40 years, the average has been only rising. So just to kind of give a background of why this 1.1 is important, let's look at what happens if we restrict it to 1.5 degrees centigrade. There's going to be 41% increase in area burned by wildfires in average Mediterranean summer. Look at 2 degrees centigrade, it's going to increase to 62%, and at 3 degrees centigrade, increase in area burned by wildfires in average Mediterranean summer to about 97%. So this temperature, the global average, temperatures are extremely important. So why? That's basically because I think the world is coming together, obviously, to kind of make sure that we don't have these extreme weather events. However, what is relevant for us, for the context of this presentation as well, is the SBTi guidelines that came in. So basically, it's after the Paris Agreement, which happened in 2015, that we said 195 member countries signed up to limit the global temperature rise well within 2 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. So that's a very important COP meeting that happened and very relevant for companies like ourselves. And then the SBTi guidelines comes in for companies to adopt. So the SBTi pathway to becoming net zero, about 92% of the companies and organizations follow this pathway. So there are basically 3 aspects to this. One is the reporting, the annual reporting. Then you have a short-term goal and a long-term goal. Companies like Carrier, we have, it's not just Carrier. It's a brand neutral presentation. Basically, across the HVAC portfolio, if you see, a lot of these companies have said that we will be, setting near and long-term greenhouse gas emission reduction goals in line with the science-based targets initiatives to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. So there are a lot of companies there, and we're going to become net zero by 2050. And by 2030, we're going to become carbon neutral. We also said that we will work towards helping our customers reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by 1 gigaton by 2030. So I'll tell you why that is a major goal for HVAC companies. But before that, quickly running through the different emission buckets. We have got scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, burn, by, and beyond emissions, direct and indirect emissions, classified in different ways. So in terms of direct emissions, from a HVAC perspective, if there is a gas leakage from a customer premise, and let's say the gas has a global warming potential, I mean, take the example of R134A, it's got a global warming potential of 1290. And if about 1,000 kgs of gas escapes from a customer premise, multiply that by 1290, and that's the kind of global emissions that we are attributed to, in terms of the HVAC equipment alone. Look at value chain emissions and indirect emissions. Obviously, the emissions on account of HVAC is for tropical climates is anywhere between 22 to 25%. I'm not talking about embodied emissions. These are the operational emissions, right? So there's a very significant chunk of emissions coming out of HVAC. So it's extremely important for us to work on the scope 2 emissions for our customers. Like, having said that, companies, HVAC companies are now interested in working with their customers to help and reduce their emissions by about 1 gigaton. So now, if you look at value chain emissions are indirect emissions, both upstream and downstream. We've heard about a lot of scope 3 emissions, but the numbers that I'm going to present next about HVAC companies' scope 3 emissions is going to be phenomenal. So there is upstream coming from supply chain, and there is downstream, which is actually going to our customers. That's the scope 3 emission. Now let's look at this. For a HVAC company, you'll realize that scope 1 emissions is 0.07% of the total emissions. Scope 2 is 0.07% again. Scope 3 is about 99.86% of a HVAC company's emissions. So given that, if you do a further Pareto analysis and see where are the emissions really coming from, is it upstream or downstream, you'll find that 8% of those emissions, so the scope 3 emissions are upstream, which is actually the supply chain emissions. And about 91% of that is actually an account of the products and solutions HVAC companies' customers would use. So that's a very significant number lying there. As far as the upstream emissions are concerned, many HVAC companies today have said that they're going to, because, for example, take the example of Carrier, we've got more than 54 manufacturing facilities spread across the globe. So if you have to really kind of look at their emissions, it's practically impossible for us to do embodied emissions. So what we do is we put them on a platform called EcoVadis. On the EcoVadis platform, about 80% of what we source goes through this check, and then we are fairly sure that they follow the compliances that are required from an ESG perspective. But downstream, so how are we going to do it? Now, downstream is actually the emissions on account of our products and solutions being with our customers. So that's how the ESG goal that we have taken for ourselves, one key element is that we will work with our customers and help them reduce their emissions by 1 gigaton before 2030. So that's the goal that we have taken. This is the goal that was taken at the beginning of the decade, but in COP28 and 29, we have said that why restrict ourselves to 1 gigaton? We will probably look at doing more than that, maybe 30 gigatons, from 2030 to 2050. So just changing gears quickly, in the context of this presentation, there are net zero roadmaps, and there are broadly 3 of them, which is carbon offset, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. If you look at the 3 major pathways and their impact on a company's net zero goals, you'll find that the carbon offset method has a very low impact. It's business as usual. So you have emissions, you set it off by taking carbon credits. Renewable energy is good. It's got an impact of about 10 to 15% in terms of helping a customer, a user, to achieve their net zero goals. But that's got certain limitations of its own. You got only so much space for you to set up maybe a renewable solar panel and wind energy. And also the element that, you have to pay wheeling charges from the source to the supply. I think you have wheeling charges coming in the way. But whereas energy efficiency, given that from a HVAC perspective, there are about 22% GHG emissions involved there, about 50 to 80% of clients' net zero goals can be achieved through this. Not just energy efficiency. Energy efficiency can be improved by using digital products where we have AI and IoT playing a very important role. I'll just quickly run through a slide in which we're trying to see what are the different solutions that can make a building more, more eco-friendly, more, less of carbon emissions coming out of that. So there are modernization solutions, there are upgrade solutions, BMS solutions, digital solutions, and OpEx solutions a HVAC company typically offers today. And all of that is actually very, very important, very relevant, because I'm just going back one slide. For a building which is expected to last for about 100 to 125 years, any HVAC asset, for that matter, any of the 25 asset categories that gets into a building is expected to last anywhere between 15 to 17 years. So following a straight line depreciation method, that asset is actually off your books within the next 5 to 6 years. So, but when you go for a retrofit, the 100% IRR that's coming out is actually with with an energy efficiency retrofit. Where we have energy conservation measures, you go do an energy audit and come back and have a list of 10, 12 energy conservation measures and then implement them. It's got 100% IR. Trust me when I say this, we've met a lot of customers and they've realized that this is possibly the best way. The energy efficiency method is the best way to kind of get to the net zero goals. And in a building, I'm not spending too much time here. Any building, there are ample opportunities, a lot of opportunities for us to actually get into a building and then work with them on the, carbon emission reduction goals. Quickly, on the IoT platform, so what are the various things that can actually come in? So there is healthy air, which is actually, building wellness has become a very, very important aspect. You've got IoT sensors coming in, with 10 different parameters. It could be PM 2.5, PM 10, CO2, CO, radon, a lot of VOCs and everything that can actually get into in a very hazardous manner for a building operation can now be captured and monitored on a continuous basis. Deploy a sensor for maybe 2,500 to 3,500 square feet area, and then I think the data is available on the cloud for people to access. And with the algorithms written over there, it's easy to kind of monitor a building and say whether it's good or bad. So likewise, occupant assistant, you don't have to kind of kick on the lighting management system or the air con, basically, without having load there. So you have an occupant assistance system which counts the number of people inside a building and then help reduce energy there. Net zero management tool. So net zero management, many speakers before this, have spoken about the BRSR requirement and then BRSR with the net zero management tool. It should be so helpful, so easy that you just click on a button on a sustainability report. I think you should have the BRSR report coming in. Scope 1 and 2 are basically easy, but scope 3, the customer has to define. So this is possible. The HVAC performance analytics, and the predictive insights, this is a very, very important element. Now today, when a HVAC asset is deployed at a customer site, and we are flowing data continuously to the IoT platform, the algorithms that are built on the cloud platform is capable of saying what can happen on an asset 6 to 8 weeks ahead of its actual instance. It's monitoring many parameters. The machine learning is obviously happening there. Even before the asset is is likely to fail, we're able to predict that and then make sure that that failure doesn't happen. Now, how does it help? I think that I've tried to kind of correlate through the impact an HVAC company has on the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions of a client who are taking services from a HVAC company. On scope 1 direct emissions, if we're able to predict well in advance that the gas leakage is likely to happen in a particular premise, we clearly know that we can go and prevent that. So that GWP multiplied by so many kgs of gas disposed to the atmosphere is taken care of through predictive insights by taking the data to the IoT platform. Scope 2, I need not speak. I've already said that 22% of operational emissions are already taken care because the HVAC companies are working really hard to make sure that the assets are optimized. And the other thing is we also bring in predictive, the edge AI. Basically, it takes into account all the operating parameters and makes sure that the system is working at its most energy efficient set point. And the third one, I think scope 3 emissions. For a client, the scope 3 emission actually is a HVAC technician going from their office to the site and servicing it. So look at the tailpipe emissions. Multiply any distance is 25 kilometers, the carbon factor. So that's a scope 3 emission that we are able to reduce by bringing in IoT technology, by doing digital warranty, by also being able to kind of estimate what are the number of parts that are required and take those parts along with you before you go and actually land up at a customer site, servicing them. So that's clearly what I wanted to set the context as. But the last one, the more important one is, it's known, it's pretty clear that there is a ESG intersection between the HVAC companies and the clients that we work with. Right? There's a clear intersection because 91% of the emissions coming out of a HVAC company is actually on account of customers. So HVAC companies working with the customers, with the clients to ensure that their carbon emissions are reduced is a classic intersection that I wanted to kind of explain. So what really happens is understanding a client's ESG requirements, aligning the offerings, and then making commitments would be the ideal path forward. So with that, I'll end the context setting. I know it's been a long context setting, but then I go back, take my seat, and then we have perspectives from the panelists. So can we close this? Sure. So this is a question to all the panelists. So the HVAC industry is embracing digital solutions to enhance lifecycle management and sustainability. From your unique perspective, whether it's sustainability, manufacturing, or ESG, how have these solutions impacted the HVAC sector in terms of efficiency, environmental sustainability, and operational effectiveness? So I'll hand it to Namrata for your perspective on this. Feel free, I think you can explain the other aspects of ESG because I've tried to kind of cover mostly on the HVAC side of it. Over to you, thanks.
So I'd like to first begin by saying that that was that is such an interesting way of saying that, almost everything that we do around us actually leads to so many emissions. And if you think innovatively, there are different ways in which we can create positive ecosystems to reduce emissions. So thank you for that, Manjunath. That was really exciting and interesting. I just want to say that almost everything around us is changing. So the way we grow things, the way we manufacture things, the way we ship things around, all that is going to change very soon because of the increased focus on emissions. That fundamentally means that we need to create more and more such ecosystems where we say that the emissions around the products that we consume, the way we live our lives, need to actually reduce. Now, that's not an easy task because a lot of things that we see around us, including this hall that we are sitting in, have been created using materials that are not biodegradable, that have embodied carbon emissions in them, and also are not very easy to reuse or recycle. That means that every single product, every single thing that we use, at least mostly, needs to be either redesigned or we need to look at new materials that we are using. And in parallel, we need to keep track of the data that will tell us where we are on this journey to reduce carbon emissions and to create a greener, more inclusive world. And I also want to link this up to our Viksit Bharat story. The government of India is very keen to convert India into a developed country. A developed nation is critical to us because it will, take us on the path to growth, move millions out of poverty. But at the same time, this growth, this movement towards Viksit Bharat cannot be without environmental consciousness. It cannot be without green growth. It cannot be without inclusion. Again, as a parallel track to that, we need, therefore, technology. While we have technology that measures, the financial aspects of the world around us, we don't really have an India stack for sustainability, and that's something that we need to think about. We have a payments ecosystem, so every minute, every day, we know the digital payments that are happening in our country. We know the financials of all companies on a daily, quarterly, monthly, annual basis. But we don't know how much waste is being generated in our country, what our carbon emissions are, how much water is being used, and where we stand on our net zero journey. We can measure the energy consumption, yes, we have metering systems, but there's way, way more to sustainability than that. So I'd just like to say that, the journey has started, but there's way more to be done in terms of moving towards green growth and an enabling ecosystem that can actually help us.
Thank you, Namrata, for that. Anand Shekhar, your perspective, please.
Thank you. There's a convenience of, building on a lot of, great remarks. So I will greatly benefit from it already. Before I actually share from the industry where I come in, Ashok has already introduced Sabik in the room. I wanted to start from, the context of HVAC and some of the dichotomies that we actually see, right? Like one of the aspects is, as a country with, air conditioning growing, there is a context of luxury, attached to it, but then, it is even seen as a survival aspect. So when you're growing to maybe 9-10 times the size that you have as air conditioning today, how much of that has to also cater to the survival needs, like in places like Delhi where you have like heat waves and, people struggling to survive. And there's also an interesting, dichotomy in, growth and decarbonization, right? We have to grow and, as a country with, larger demands, etc. But you are also dealing with decarbonization, coupled to it. So that's an interesting dichotomy to solve as well.
The third aspect is, like AI and the digital aspects that Manjunath introduced, and how, like generally AI is seen as, maybe a direction of, taking away jobs, right? So how do you look at AI complementing jobs or making, like livelihood and jobs, like better? And some of the aspects from HVAC, like which were also coming already in the slides of Manjunath, on how you can actually apply AI and digital solutions to improve, energy efficiency. Some of the reports that we were reading on this indicates that you already have, like until 2030 to reduce improve energy efficiency by up to, like 40%, but you actually reach a certain point, right? But then when you are growing in size, it is not more with energy efficiency, it's much more to do with, like system level problem solving. A lot of that, like AI can help significantly in. And secondly, Manjunath mentioned about, like one of the remarks on intersection, right? I would even take it further to call it like confluence. You have a lot of, like AI actually, like feeds on data, and it is not data of only HVAC systems that would actually solve for innovation. It's possibly you need to have data on, the number of solar, PVs that you would have on the roofs. How much more do you need for the number of EVs that are growing in a certain neighborhood? And possibly if there are marginalized workers living in that neighborhood, how many of maybe community halls that are needed, which is not giving you the 25-degree luxury in an outside environment of 50, but possibly, like bringing the temperature down to, habitable levels for survival, right? So there's a lot of, like innovation in this space that can be aided by digitalization. And maybe that gives me a good segue to also bring some perspectives from the, the petrochemical industry where we belong, in SABIC, where Ashok, like brought in the views of disclosure needs in ESG, and what you have to tell the outside world about the actions that we are doing in sustainability as, like one aspect to it. The other angle is also, like how much of the data you need even for the marketplace, right? So there were also Namrata's remarks on system level, redesigning of products. Like one cue I can take from, HVAC systems is how you look at it from a life cycle point of view, right? So it's not about the energy that we consume in the refrigerators or air conditioners, but it's more about the emissions that happen, like to generate the energy. There is always a life cycle, like angle to it. A lot of data on carbon footprint is actually needed today in the marketplace, but even by regulatory authorities in certain parts of the world. And this means, like in SABIC, for instance, we have invested quite heavily in automating a lot of, like this, data generation, because it's about how closer you are to the true source of data, the data of the meterers and, like the CO2 emission stacks and etc. And how much of the data can be translated into, like calculating product carbon footprint. For instance, SABIC, like a few thousands of products, we need to offer this data to, like customers in the marketplace. So it's a clear space again, like where this whole confluence of, like sustainability, like digital transformations and, like growth of the industries is, like, providing a perfect, like place for innovation.
Thank you. Over to Dheeraj for your perspective.
Thank you, Anand, for your opinion. Of course, Namrata, it's an interesting way of looking at things, the way you explained it to us. But coming from the air conditioning background and the field, people look at us as if when it comes to carbon footprint increase in the world, we are probably the only culprits and should be hanged. So setting the context right, it's important for us to understand that how much of contribution does the HVAC world has towards this. So if you look at the energy Pareto for that matter, and we see that where does the energy get consumed? So there are broadly three basic segments where it gets consumed. The largest one happens to be the buildings. Buildings consume about 40% of the energy generated, followed by industries, which is about 30-odd%, and almost a similar number by the transportation field. So these are the three areas where the complete energy gets consumed. So when we focus only on buildings, probably we are looking at the larger chunk. Of course, industries also are there, and transportation also is there. I'll touch upon that. But first important piece, inside the buildings, about, again, another 40% of energy gets consumed inside the buildings by HVAC systems. So about 16% is what is HVAC is contributing towards energy consumption inside a building. So that's the reality. Of course, industries will have a different Pareto and followed by transportation. And we see a lot of that in terms of the work being done in the industries. I was a part of one of the discussions in the US-India Business Council, and there was a lot of focus around how we can reduce the energy consumption inside the industries and contribute towards decarbonization. So there are a lot of good ideas coming from the industry, who are even from the distribution side, generation side, user, everybody. And from the transportation side, the way we look at India today, of course, you've got airports, you've got railways, you've got road transport, you've got metros, you've got developments like happening. We are talking about 400 airports running in next about 20 odd years is what I read a report a few days back. And we are talking about railway stations being developed under PPP model. We are getting metros in each and every city now. So that's the kind of development we are having, and each one of this application will have air conditioning. So that's the kind of contribution air conditioning will have. So it is significant, undoubtedly, and that puts another responsibility on us as manufacturers and distributors, that what can we do towards this cause. So, there are ways and means. As an organization, we have a commitment towards becoming a net zero by 2050. It's a huge responsibility. Coming from an air conditioning organization, setting a goal for net zero globally is not easy task. So there we have set ourselves, and this will come through our solutions and services. Some bit of it, why I call solutions, is it's no longer a world which banks only on products. Today, the user asks that, can you have a better solution to reduce energy consumption? So we have to design our products in such a way that we give them an optimized energy solutions. Of course, the services is something which happens by way of digital tools. And here we step in with the investments we have done as an organization in the digital world, where we can serve our customers better. The more data we can extract, the more information we can extract, we can use it for optimizing the energy consumptions. We can use that data to see that how can we do our operations better. In the last discussion on the panel on this dais itself, we heard almost all organizations are talking about reporting. So while they're reporting, they would also be interested in how can I optimize my operations? How can I optimize my reporting? How can I optimize my use? So that I can pull it down and contribute towards decarbonization. And here a lot of development has happened with respect to tools which can be used and put across as installed when you are deciding on your air conditioning systems. And that's how we are working towards our goal with our customers and users. So I hope I've been able to put my point across that we are not the only culprits.
Thanks, Dheeraj, for that. So now to more specific questions. We'll ask Namrata first. With India's commitment to sustainability and net zero by 2070, how do you see digitally enabled life cycle solutions? Although I put in my question HVAC, but generally contributing to national sustainability goals, what key policies or frameworks could further accelerate this transformation?
Thanks, Manjunath. So let's just divide the problem of net zero into some smaller segments, right? So if we just say that, India has a net zero target, and we need to do many things to actually achieve it. One of the most important thing is the switch to renewable energy, right? But then the switch to renewable energy is something that is applicable and can be done by, almost all of us who are living in independent homes. But when it comes to societies, it becomes a challenge because it needs collective thinking. In factories, once again, there are a lot of industries that have actually moved to renewable energy, but there are others who are still on the road to actually switching. And there are some industries which are largely unorganized, and it's not an easy pathway. On the other side, there is energy efficiency. Now, energy efficiency is again something that impacts all of us. So energy efficiency as a low-hanging fruit is possible, it's doable, and it's also an enabler in actually moving us to net zero in a faster way. So while we say that, and for that, when we start saying that what is my energy efficiency, and where do I need to go, you need to create a baseline, and you need to start actually mapping that on an ongoing basis. In that space, digital tools become very important, where we start saying that, you know, we are able to capture data on an ongoing basis. Now, there are many other aspects as well. Say, for example, around waste, the quantity of waste that an organization generates, what do we do with it, and what is the life cycle of the products that you're manufacturing, and what happens after customer usage. So the waste ecosystem, once again, is a low-hanging fruit that can be handled, that needs to be done. And organizations today are faced with the extended producer responsibility regulations that the Indian government has brought in, which means that everybody needs to start looking at this very carefully and actively. It's also an area where a lot of innovation is lacking. So to my mind, if we actually digitally enable these two big areas, we will be able to make significant strides on our net zero goals.
Thanks for that, Namrata. On the digitally enabled solutions, I think we're going to quickly get to our net zero goals, India goals of 2070, being net zero by 2070. So I'm looking at Anand now. So, with India's sustainability and life cycle assessment, LCA focus, how do you see digitally enabled life cycle solutions supporting the circular economy and improving environmental outcomes?
Thank you, Manjunath, for the question. Again, I'm building on at least starting from remarks that Namrata made just, even if you look at circularity as one aspect, right? Like we look at product not from, where the product is being used, but also from, what it takes to produce the product, what it takes to dispose the end of life emissions. This already also brings a lot of, LCA angles to the subject, which is, early days in India, but, the rest of the world is, progressing quite a lot in this space, right? So from maybe the choice of a warmer blanket to, having to heat the whole room already is, one, angle to the subject, right? And it's also about what happens to these materials at the end of their life and what is the best thing to do with them. Some of them are probably better equipped for, going all the way to what is called chemical recycling, while some others probably have, design solutions to handle. So there is quite a lot of, choice making to do where we need to have the data on, which of these choices gives you the lowest impacts. And that's really where the LCA thinking comes in. Also taking the cue from some of the data that, like Manjunath's slides presented on HVAC itself, right? Where you are looking at a lot of emissions that happen outside of your control in the value chain, right? It could be upstream and downstream. And this is purely the area where, LCA thrives, because you need to have the data. And this is also a very interesting space where in the recent 2-3 years, we have seen a lot of activity, especially for digital ecosystems. There's something called the data exchange platforms. So these data exchange platforms are being, recently mobilized. It is to ensure that value chain partners can share data on, product carbon footprint or, other LCA data, but, almost entirely digitally, right? Imagine companies like SABIC who are probably supplying materials to almost every possible industry. It becomes, quite critical for us to be having such digital platforms to, exchange data with a larger need of consumer base. It could also be, there are examples of, others than SABIC, even attempting concepts on blockchain, where when there is an increased emphasis for data sharing, it is not also always, one direction of the value chain, right? So there's data to be extracted even from your customers and data offered to customers, which means you can actually do a lot of that even on, more advanced systems like blockchain, where it's, more appropriate to do. So I think that's really where, going back to my earlier point, there's a confluence of, sustainability and digital ecosystems. They can influence and catalyze each other.
Thanks, Anand, for that response. Because see, as a manufacturer, as a product company, you find it extremely hard to get an LCA done, because we source it from diverse, locations, different countries, different geographies. So I think it's very important, digitizing it and then LCA, putting these two things together. I think we will achieve our net zero goals faster. Now, over to Dheeraj, from a manufacturer's perspective. So, digital lifecycle solutions, have they influenced product design, production processes, and after-sales services in the HVAC industry? Do you foresee lifecycle solutions becoming a mandatory part of product sales in India overall?
I will answer this in a little different way. I think we as a country have taken the first step now when it comes to a complete portfolio in the air conditioning segment. Are the decisions being made on the life cycle of any equipment or solution being provided? The answer is yes and no, because quite a few users are asking and making those decisions that way. But a larger part of the community, while they say, but the actual decisions are not made on that basis, this still goes by the capital cost only. So that's a little unfortunate. But having said that, as when I say first step has been taken, I'm actually very happy, and all of us should be proud of that, that till about 4 years back, we were using products basis certification either on HRI basis, which are American standards, or the Eurovent standards, which is Europe standards. But today, government has set up and laid down norms wherein we have standards on India environmental conditions. The tropical climate which we have here which is unparalleled, because we have got 9 different type of climates within the country itself, which is not the case with many other countries. So we have to find a way in which we look at our products basis our climate, not others' climate. So now we have standards, a labeling program, which helps us decide on the air conditioning systems, whether it are unitary products or central plants, on the basis of those star labeling, and we can pick up the product. But next step is there any work being done around when we look at these services and solutions that we pick up them on the life cycle basis? It's something which is some distance away, but I think that the path is there in front of us. We have to move in that direction. We all can contribute towards that in our respective roles and responsibilities which we have today. So of course, as an organization, the products and the services now we are designing for last about, I can say, 7 to 8 years, because we already are and have been a solution-based organization even when we manufacture our products. So always when we go back to the user, whether it's an application of hotel, hospitality, healthcare, any other application, we always give an alternative solution which is more cost-effective, energy efficient, and of course makes sense in buying that in terms of a life cycle assessment being done around that solution. Now it depends on the user whether they want to take that call or not. So that's how I would like to end up on this point. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for that, Dheeraj. So we are running short on time. So this is a real fast one. To Namrata, is the digitization helping in the sustainability reporting? Like we heard about BRSR so much. So will digitization really take us there in terms of expediting the sustainability reporting, or will it help in terms of tracking it better? What's your perspective?
I think it will help in both. But companies need to chase down data. And the data problem is a very real one, not just for within their premises, but scope 3 emissions, getting in suppliers on board. So the entire data problem around sustainability is a challenge. If we are able to solve that, we can certainly get to faster, more efficient reporting.
Okay, thank you. Anand, quickly to you. Will digitization help the LCA process and the circular economy path that you spoke about earlier?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And maybe since we are heading towards lunch, I'll also make my responses short, right? As building on my earlier remarks, it's a perfect ecosystem with with a large appetite for like data, and a large appetite for data to offer to data transparency and ESG reporting, exchanges in the marketplace, and predictive intelligence like AI. So yeah, like I would say that almost all industries are about to be perfectly poised for getting into a journey of sustainability and AI automation together.
Perfect. Thanks. Dheeraj, to you. In terms of IoT, AI, and data analytics, how have these innovations enhanced the sustainability and efficiency of HVAC systems and that you represent really?
You have spoken about energy efficiency almost on every questions which were discussed out here. I'll again put it in a very different way. We are not only efficient, we are not only becoming efficient with respect to energy. Each one of us sitting in this room have become more productive also. Imagine, you do everything on your phone today, whether it is healthcare, food, news, you pick up any other services, banking, anything and everything is there in your phone itself. You are able to address and answer everything in just a touch of few touches on the phone itself. And that's it. So when we become more productive, we are able to do the same work in lesser time, and we are able to focus on the core work which we are expected to do. And when we do that, our efficiency comes back in everything what we are doing today. So certainly IoT-based solutions, AI, everything is helping us as an individual, as a country, as a team, and as many organizations are adopting it very quickly.
Now I think this is more like a call to action. Some final thoughts from all the panelists, starting with Namrata. So, what immediate actions should stakeholders, government, industry, and consumers take to accelerate the adoption of digital lifecycle solutions? And what role do ESG reporting and awareness play in this sustainable change? More from a perspective that we have, through this conversation, and I mean, at least emphasize that digitization and digital lifecycle solutions is important. So, from that perspective, I think, what's your call for action?
I think the call for action is that we need a redesign of products and services. Once we actually start thinking long-term about the products and services, digitization will actually automatically come into that, and we will design for the future and not just for immediate consumption and waste in a linear system. We need to think long-term, circular systems and circular products.
Thank you. Anand?
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
I think like building on the ones that already exist today, the further call for action is more about how we can create a data ecosystem that is actually beyond, like companies and industries, right? Because solving for the best answers in artificial intelligence means you need to have data beyond what you own yourself. And there's needs to be a little more like free flow of data, like to solve it as an ecosystem.
Yeah, Dheeraj, you're...
One point which I would like to add over here is that digital tools in air conditioning world are a reality. Industry has that solution available in every product line. As a user, whichever segment you are in, you must ask for it, you must adopt it, you must use it to the advantage of analytics for every possible aspect within that, so that you can contribute towards saving of energy, which contributes towards decarbonization. So adoption is the key word, because the technology exists today and is being used.
Yeah, so the final thoughts were the summary. So I'm not going to kind of summarize the conversation, the panelists, I think in their words, and and the call for action. I'll not be able to do justice to that. So with that, do we have time for maybe a couple of questions from the audience? If there are any? Anybody wants to ask any question to the panelists? Yeah, see a hand raising there. Can somebody hand over the mic there?
Thank you. We discussed about HVAC manufacturing industry, as scope 3 is cooling gases is one of the major contributor for scope 3 CO2 emission. Now we spoke about R134A, which is having GWP of more than 1,000 or 1,200. So now there is a R32, which is the lowest GWP potential gas available. But it's very rare that manufacturers supply the HVAC in R32. So what are the challenges and how we can adopt such materials which is having lowest GWP, which is having 675 kgs per kg of cooling gas, which is almost 50% that we are using currently. So how we can adopt such materials which is having lowest GWP?
Good question.
What are the challenges?
Right, yeah. So I will start off and then maybe hand it to Dheeraj for maybe giving a more elaborate sort of response to that question. See, all gases are not suitable for all applications. Like you spoke about R32, which is a high GWP gas. Basically, it's got a GWP in excess of 600, and it may not be suitable for chiller applications. It could be probably used for light commercial or VRF applications. And also, R32 classification-wise is probably not the best. So what we have today got is actually a gas which has got 0 ODP and very close to 0 GWP. So those are the gases of the future. So since we have a large installed base of equipment that are using these gases, we have a drop-in refrigerant coming, and then I think eventually we will switch to some of these more eco-friendly gases, which has got 0 ODP and very low GWP. So Dheeraj, you want to add anything more to that?
You touched upon the right point. That gas is not suitable as of now, basis technology available for the larger chilled water systems. It is more into direct expansion type systems, and most of the organizations have already transitioned to R32. It's not that it's not available. It is available, transitioning is happening, and you will shortly see almost all the organization moving towards, more importantly, low GWP refrigerants, not just restricting to only one refrigerant. So we have those options available. It's only a matter of time where the scale of economy helps us to transition completely into those refrigerants.
Okay, I've got a note saying that I've got time for just one last question. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question to the panelists? Okay. If there are none, then I think we'll conclude the panel discussion. And thank you for being such a wonderful audience. And thank the panelists. I think a lot of learning, and thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion of this session. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed panelists and moderator for sharing their valuable insight. May I kindly request all to for a group photograph? Thank you. May I kindly request all us, ladies and gentlemen, we now break for lunch. Please join us back by 1:30 as we have very special plenary featuring Bhupender Yadav, Honorable Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change as the chief guest. This session will take place in this hall. Also, air quality is displayed on the back screen highlighting the difference in air quality inside and outside of this hall. Also, lunch is open in both halls, that is this hall and in the Sovereign Hall too. So I request everyone to please proceed for lunch. Thank you.
Sure.